Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield for a couple of questions?
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Gottfried. You can count me among the members that might be a little confused by some of your answers. And I will quote from you on page 2 of the bill, line 37, part 35 says the term, quote, gender, identity, or expression, unquote, means having or being perceived as having a gender identity, self-image, appearance, behavior, or expression, whether or not that gender identity, self-image, appearance, behavior, or expression is different from that traditionally associated with the sex assigned to that person at birth. So my question is quite simply, under this bill, the part I don't want to see anybody discriminated against that's transgendered or anything like that, but the part that really concerns me about this bill is the potential harm that we are putting our children putting in their way. And I'll tell you what I mean. You could have a guy dressed just like me. He's not gender confused. He's not a cross-dresser. He's got all the chromosomes. But the fact is, he just simply says, because he might be a predator, voyeur, rapist, etc., he just says, I identify myself as a man. And as I read it, this legislation would allow him to walk right on into the ladies' room. And if I'm wrong, please explain to me where I'm wrong, because I don't see it. Because I'm identifying as a woman, I can therefore walk on in. And I know you're going to say that it hasn't happened yet. My question would be, are you willing to take that risk?
There's no risk in question. Under the circumstances you're describing, the proprietor would simply say, that's not true. I do not believe that in good faith that is your identity or expression. Get out. Don't you dare go into the women's locker room or the women's restroom. And I don't think one has to guess about that. I think the language there is very clear.
And the response would be...
By the way, additional reason why I am confident in saying that that wouldn't happen is that New York would not be the first place to enact such legislation. Any number of jurisdictions and companies and places around this country have tried this out over a period of years in all manner of settings. If you think there's an experiment that needs to be done before we act, that experiment has been running for years all over New York, in various parts of New York State, in various parts of the country, and in many parts of corporate America. And while I agree with Dr. Miller that we should always think of hypotheticals, we should also learn from experience. And the hypotheticals have just not panned out. And the kind of circumstance that you have described, I'm telling you, this bill would not authorize. And not only does I think the plain language of the bill not authorize it, but if you look at the years of experience in communities all over this country, the experience shows us that my answer is correct.
I disagree. And I can tell you why I disagree. The fact that it hasn't happened yet gives me small comfort that it won't happen in the future. The fact is, I believe the children of this state are going to be put in harm's way. One predator, one rapist, one attack is going to be on our heads for passing this on a statewide basis. And the fact that it hasn't happened yet does not give me any comfort that it won't happen in the future. So I disagree with you. And to answer your question, to kind of respond to your answer there, where you're saying the owner has the right to say, you're not identifying yourself as a woman, the answer to that's going to be, how dare you tell me how to identify my gender? Because this bill specifically says the term gender, identity, or expression. It says it right there, identity or expression. So if you identify as a woman and you're dressed like any of the men in this chamber, you can walk right on in. And if I'm sitting in a restaurant and my two daughters, and right now I'm glad I have two sons, but if I had daughters and they walked into that ladies' room and I couldn't stop a man from walking in there, and if I did, I'd be the one charged with the hate crime, strikes me as absurd. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, on the bill.
On the bill.
I am dumbfounded. My opponent voted for this last year. I ran on him against this particular bill. I understand that we don't want to discriminate against transgendered people. Neither do I. and I don't believe that we have any attacks by transgender people. They're not usually pedophiles or rapists or predators. But the fact is, this bill puts the children of this state in harm's way. And just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And I cannot in good conscience vote for a bill that I know puts the children in harm's way in this state. And for that reason, I'm urging a no vote on this bill.